I'm Jeremy Till, and this is Amplify. Jake Thompson of Compete Everyday joining us. It was a pleasure to sit down with him. I've gotten to know him over the past few years, watching Compete grow from a startup out of his house into the burgeoning business that it is today. He's got a big following all across the country, and I imagine the world that is inspired by his message of Compete Every Day and the apparel line he's created. But in the podcast, we get to learn more about what the Compete message is about and what he's doing with the community and really forging a business that goes right in hand with his lifestyle. And it's pretty awesome to see him grow and take action in building his business and learning and building his network. So let's learn from him today, and let's compete. Cool. My first question for you is Optimus or Pessimist?
I think I'd have to be an optimist. Couldn't have Compete Every Day if I didn't have a positive outlook, right?
Yeah, I was just curious. I know because your title at Compete is Chief
Encouragement Officer.
I like that a lot. So tell us a little bit about your kind of beginning stages of Compete, because I just think that's kind of where we'll start, and then we'll hear that full story.
Awesome. So I started actually working career was in college and grad school, wanting to be the next Jerry Maguire. I was passionate about getting into sports agency. Went to grad school for it and realized with about 2 weeks left that was not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I would die before 40 of a heart attack. I felt of stress levels and everything else that it goes into it. And so I started freelancing. It was fall of 2008, graphic design, marketing, basic web strategy, and spent 2 years building a pretty successful consulting business. So financially, I was very comfortable, enjoyed what I was doing, but struggled with kind of an identity of what I was going to leave behind. And it was, I'd been reading a book talking about the stories we tell with our lives, and really kind of came to a personal crisis in my mid to late 20s of, man, if I died, like I've built nothing that goes beyond my name. I've built nothing that impacts people other than the bottom line. I want to do something different. And so I started tinkering with this idea of pursuing your faith, your work, your health, your dreams, your relationships, what that could look like for someone that would pursue greatness in all those areas. And this idea of Compete Every Day came up. And I asked two of my buddies about it. Both of them were like, dude, that fits your personality. Like, you're the most competitive person we know. If you lose a game of Madden, you're going to play us 10 times in a row after that to win every single game. And so I had this idea, I had this message, but didn't really know what to do with it. And ironically, it was at the Burnett location at Real Biz. I came down, still didn't have a clue what I wanted to do with it, but listening to you guys talk and listening to Gary Vee, started to put some pieces together. And my best friend, kind of looking at all of it, said, you ought to look at apparel. He said, look at the brand Life is Good. Look at these guys out of Boston. They have a stick figure, ironically named Jake, and they're built on the power of optimism. And he said they started selling T-shirts out of a van. He said now they do 140 plus million a year in sales. He said their audience is a wide range. He said, I think you could take what you're talking about with Compete. He said, I think you can do some of this CrossFit stuff you've gotten into and just the overall market because it seems to fit. And so not knowing any better, I'd saved up some money for a guy's trip to New Zealand. My best friend was going to go with me. He ended up spending his money on an engagement ring for his now wife. And so instead of going solo, I was like, why not? Do some money into some T-shirts and tank tops, hideous T-shirts and tank tops, but they had Compete Every Day on it, and just started hustling, selling them out of the back of my car behind CrossFit gym, going to events, really talking to anyone and everyone that would give me the time of day.
That's awesome. So, I mean, it has expanded in the sense of from the T-shirts. I know you've done a few different things, but I think now you're kind of have a message that's, supporting Compete. And I know, too, that Compete's not necessarily just about competing against other people. And I think there's a bigger message there, because I know some of your stuff online and, positive, lines are about competing against yourself and just being your best you. So is that kind of like a message that you want to get out to people? Is it like total domination, win at everything?
No. I think the core message of it is being better than you were yesterday. And the idea that their only competition we have is against ourselves and what we do, and understanding at the end of today, I'm going to evaluate where I fell short, where I hit a home run, and then tomorrow I'm going to try to step my game up even more. And so everything we try to do is to make that positive mark. There's enough negativity out there in the world, from the morning news to, I mean, right now, election season, you name it, that we want to create some kind of positive message, influence, impact on people. And so everything that we do, even on our funny shirts, has that, because inside of every shirt is the short message, my life is worth competing for. And so people see it when they put it on. And so it's never about me versus you, because that's controlled by what you do and third-party outcomes. What I can control is me. And so it's really about me competing against myself, and putting that out there so people remember that and they don't get caught up in the looking at other social media highlights or comparing my journey to someone else's journey that's completely different.
Mm-hmm. So what is your strategy for yourself and for people with the negativity that's out there? And it seems like every day it's like, I start to avoid Facebook or avoid this channel because of the negativity. And it's like, how do you stay positive in a kind of somewhat of a negative environment? And I know that success coaches and people will teach you, like, navigate it away from that type of stuff, but it kind of seems to be everywhere.
It is everywhere, and I think that's a daily competition in and of itself in terms of where your focus is going to be. I think with me, a lot of what I try to do is, who I surround myself with, and surrounding yourself with people that are success-driven or are very positive thinkers, positive speakers, is huge. Second, I think the words I use have a huge impact on how I behave and how I act. If I'm using the words I can't, I don't do this, or anything negative about my word usage, I think it impacts how I behave and how people interact with me and how people perceive me. And so I try to stay positive in language. And the third is just check myself. I mean, I think it comes down to noticing where I want to be long-term as a husband, as a business owner, as a team leader, what my goals are long-term, and that focus, and not letting the immediate negativity things, failures right in front of me deter that. And so understanding what I see online, if I see someone else that's having great success, you immediately feel this, part of it's jealousy, part of it's like, man, why am I not having that level of success? I just have to stop and just out loud say, all right, Jake, I'm feeling a little bit of jealousy. I'm feeling unqualified for this. Acknowledging that language and then understanding I don't know their story. I don't know their journey. I don't know what they overcame or how much farther ahead they might have started than me. And then getting back to, what can I control? Well, me. All right, let's look at what I'm focused on. Cool, that's great for them. I'll encourage them, but let me maintain focus on me.
Mm-hmm. So a little bit more of your story from a business standpoint. How old were you? Well, how old is Compete?
Compete, 5.5 years. We started, our first online sale was May 26, 2011.
Okay. And so in the 5 years, you're a single guy, now you're married. And so how has the business evolution, come about and where you are today, where you see it from when you started,
It's been a huge growth. I mean, we grew that first, was it May to December? We lost money because I had no idea what I was doing. Knew nothing about screen printing shirts or retail. I was watching other companies and trying to do what they did. 2012, I started to put my foot in the water of going to events. I didn't really have money to sponsor events or have booths at expos and things, but we started to get out there a little bit in terms of talking to more people and just trying to learn. 2013, 14, and 15 was, I kind of laugh about my hustle years. I wasn't married at the time. I met my wife in 2015, and so 13, 14, I was on the road all the time on weekends. I would pack up on a Friday, I'd go set up, I'd work an event Saturday or Saturday and Sunday, and I'd come back home, and then I'd work 4 or 5 days doing consulting projects to pay the bills, because it wasn't until probably early to mid 2014 that I could even pay myself any kind of salary. I spent some money early on some consultants to say, hey, help me refine the message, get this exactly how I want it to be, and then got it to a point to where it was no longer of, hey, I've always got shirts in my car, they're always in my house. Hired my first team member, Christine, in 2014, and she's been an absolute rock star, and I think that was, I'm sure you can acknowledge as a business owner, it's the scariest thing you do, of hiring someone on your team for the first time, but also one of those biggest steps that most of us take too long to make, because then it frees us up to go do other things to grow the business. And so when she came on board, it allowed me the opportunity to still travel as much, but really focus on how do we get the brand into more locations, stores, or places outside of what I can take on a Friday or Saturday and sell. And so we did that. We doubled from 12 to 13, 13 to 14, and then we did a 1.5 times growth in 14 to 15. And then this year we're already through 2 quarters, we were ahead of where we were last year. So we're starting to hit that tipping point, I think, that is just acceleration, where there's enough people know about it, it starts to spread faster and faster. We've got a team now that's pretty awesome, and I'm still pretty humbled that we have a lot of people that have bought into the message of 6 core people, and then we have a lot of people that work on events for us on the weekend, so I'm not having to travel every Friday, Saturday. Especially now married, my wife would hate it if every time she's off work, I'm on the road. But that's kind of been our growth, and a lot of that has been about people making early sacrifices in terms of they buy into the long term, they see where we want to go, and so they're willing to say, I'll work for a little less now because I believe in what you're doing and helping us get to that next level, that next level, that next level. And then just the community aspect of trying to pour into people that we care about them. Like, we actually, I mean, having a shirt is great. I love when you buy a shirt, but like, even if you come by the booth and pick up a wristband and then you shoot us an email later and say, hey, like, I had a really crappy day, but then I saw this wristband and it just kind of reminded me, like, that's why we try to do it. And so I think that kind of stuff feeds our team and our growth in the community.
Mm-hmm. So y'all have T-shirts, but y'all also have other gear as well.
Yeah, so we do right now T-shirts, tank tops, workout shorts for guys and girls, socks, wristbands, posters, all that kind of stuff, everything motivational-wise. Posters and coffee mugs, really just daily items you can see. We're branching out over the next 12 to 14 months, bringing in some new products. I want to get some other offerings that you just don't see apparel companies doing. I mean, it's great that we're going to have a performance line dropping next year that's a little bit higher end, less branded performance fabric. But we also want to help people in the community set goals, crush goals. Like, a lot of people are struggling with maintaining that positive mindset, or I have a big goal, but I have no idea how to reverse engineer to even start. And they're kind of held by that fear. And so we want to step into those gaps that we see them needing it, that aligns with this idea of competing for your life.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of power there, for sure. I mean, and that's where I always love to interview people where they're at and where they're going, because I see such massive growth for that. So how does the line with the new shirts come out? Like, I know you've done some different cycles with like a monthly membership and like different, what's y'all's mode of retailing right now?
Yeah, so right now we've got a few fold. So in 2013, 14, 15, we did a shirt of the month club. You pay all up front, or you do a monthly subscription at a little bit higher rate. And we'd send you a shirt every month, all limited edition, one-time run. We tried to change that up in 2016 and it just fell apart. We tried to do kind of a platinum club purchase where you get a $400 plus gift card for $299, which worked out to a lot of the same offerings. But if you wanted to buy shorts, or if you wanted to buy posters or everything else, you could use that gift card for more than just a shirt. We found that people don't like the idea of choosing. They like it where it's just automatically sent to you. So we've got some big plans for this coming year in terms of bringing that shirt of the month program back, where every month in December you'll see our January shirt's going to release. And if you're not in the program, you have about a week and a half to pre-order it, and then it goes away. Once it ships, it's out the door. So we'll have 12 limited edition one-time prints. And then throughout the year, we drop little collections. And so right now this year, we've kind of moved toward a traditional retail model of, here's our fall 4 guys shorts, here's 6 or 7 shirts and tanks, because it allows us to work with our wholesale and retail partners for the collections they want to order and stock in their stores to sell, but also gives us fresh things every quarter to keep in stores, or keep in our store. And early on I struggled because our audience base was so low that I was always cycling in and out shirts, because I was trying to feed the same audience new stuff versus focusing on building that community and making the audience larger. I was just trying to serve a very small one with always doing new things. Now we're dropping the quarterly collections, and then we'll mix in that shirt of the month. So every 3 months, you'll see brand new guys shorts and patterns and styles and new shirts with some of kind of our keepsake classics are kind of always in year round if they don't change colors.
Mm-hmm. So your distribution, you're sharing a little bit earlier, was it online, and then you have events. And so what in the future do you look to get into retail stores? Is that a goal of yours, or to have your own retail stores? Or
We've played a little bit with having our own retail store. We've partnered with a group in Dallas, Virtuosity Shop, that's allowed us to test those waters a little bit. Brick and mortar retail is a tough game. I tip my hat to a lot of people that do it because the cost for rent alone is insane for most people. So I think at some point in the future, we'll have a flagship store. But when we do it, I want to do it right because it needs to have the feel of Compete. It can't walk in and just have the white walls and shelving. For now, our real focus is because we are online events and some wholesale to like Rogue Fitness and Below Parallels in Houston. We have a few groups in Australia and overseas that are buying stuff, is to grow that wholesale base and put it into more stores. We see some limitations to that right now because a lot of our market and focus is in fitness, so the figure, bodybuilding, CrossFit space, and there's not a lot of brick and mortar stores that really cater to that audience mainstream. And so we're working on finding those niches now, but where we see growth is over the next 12 to 14 months when our performance line drops and it's a higher end garment, higher end fabric and price point, being able to go after more traditional retailers with that line while still offering our basic tees, the motivational sayings and stuff online and in other stores. But we really see that performance line being kind of the way in the door to the traditional retail space, because at that point, it grows dramatically because you're putting the brand in front of a lot of other people. And brands have done it differently. Life is Good, they grew dramatically off licensing. They licensed out their brand. Unfortunately, I don't think it went well, and they had to go raise, I think, $10 million to buy all the licenses back. And so we haven't wanted to go that route in case somebody took Compete in a direction that I didn't feel was where it needed to go or wanted it to go. And so it's been a slower retail play for us, but it's one that we know long-term the growth should really be where we're 70% online, 20 to 25% wholesale to retailers, and then the last little slivers, events and expos, where that becomes more marketing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of getting a framework of all the different moving parts that you have in the sense of this line and online sales. And so with the technical side of things like that, apparel like that seems like it would be a big investment. So have you looked at outside investors coming in? Is you going to fund that all yourself?
Yeah, so that is a very big investment. And to date, I've probably sunk $15,000 to $20,000 into trying to do that. Some factories have stolen our money. Other factories just haven't been able to deliver exactly the specs and way we want it. So that's been a big cost. I've considered outside investment. I've been warned by numerous people of you've got to be 100% sure because once you sell, like there's no ever getting that equity back. And so it's something I'm very hesitant on, but I also understand kind of how the retail game plays. You almost always need a little extra capital boost to be able to make that jump into private manufacturing. So right now we're working with 3 different facilities in talks of working on samples for some new sports bras and tops. And another factory is working with us on shirts, tanks, and some men's shorts. And so we're trying to work out the arrangements with them in terms of if we can fund part of it, will they work with us on the back end, or do we need to go raise the capital up front? Because when you get into the production game, it's not like, hey, I'm going to print 300 to 400 T-shirts and we're going to mix up a few sizes and designs and sell them. It's we're printing or we're buying 1,500 of this one shirt, one color. We better sell them all, and then we got to move on to the next one. And so that's a scarier game for us. But I think what's been to our advantage is we've tried to focus on building the community and brand for years first, to where even if for some reason that does not work, we've built a solid enough business and community with everything else we've done that we can afford to take that risk.
Mm-hmm. So talking about your community, and I know you have a real loyal, committed people to the Compete brand. What does that look like on a daily basis and a monthly basis of interaction and the people that communicate with you about Compete?
It's all across the board. We get emails every week, which is pretty awesome, of people in their gear talking about what they compete for. Recently, in the last couple of months, we launched a private Facebook group. I say private. It's closed, but anyone can join that's within the community as a way for us to just daily interact. So every day I'm posting a question or a quote or shooting a video in there, something to remind them of the positive messaging we're trying to do, as well as get them to talk to each other. Like, what are you facing? Like, especially from a fear standpoint. A lot of times when we actually say out loud like what we're afraid of or what we're worried about, it loses a lot of its power. And so trying to get people to engage there. Offline, it's always going to be at events. It's talking to people. It's why we really care about who takes on our event team, and why I still love to go to these events, even if it's a hall and not always the most convenient thing, is because I love to just interact with people, and especially those that I've known for 6 years now that have followed us from day one of the shirts that you're embarrassed to even admit you sold. And so that's a lot of it. And then on social, we're always trying to put out that positive message. So Instagram, we mix in product shots, but a lot of what we post is either going to be a quote related to competing or competing against yourself or competing for your life, and then sharing what other people are competing for. It's not this idea of, I just do CrossFit, or, I'm just into fitness. It's like, no, I'm a single mom. I'm competing to make sure my kids are fed, and I'm still advancing my career. One of the guys that's been pretty active in our community, Nathan, I think he went from like 300 pounds down to, I think he's in like 180 now. And so he's been able to talk about that kind of journey of like what he's gone through from a mental standpoint to now physical, and how it's adapted, and sharing that. And so we're trying to share those stories over and over again. I think, Humans of New York is a fascinating blog and content piece because they're sharing these pictures and just what these people are doing and who they are, and it makes you very relatable to them of like, oh my gosh, I get that. And so we want to take that same approach from the people in our community, learning about them, helping them reach their goals, but also sharing their stories. I mean, the biggest thing that we can do is provide them a platform to share their story, because I'm very much under the mindset, and I share this with our ambassadors and anyone we work with, that when we face an obstacle, we tend to internalize it. Like, we don't talk about what we're facing. We don't talk about what we struggle with because we feel like we're the only ones going through this. And a lot of times we develop this mindset of whatever I'm facing is impossible because we don't know anyone else that's going through it. In all actuality, there's hundreds, if not thousands of other people going through the same situations, the same struggles, the same setbacks, or far worse. And those people aren't giving up. They're achieving success. And once we see someone else doing it, it's like our whole mindset shifts, our whole behavior shifts. It's like when you walk into a gym and you don't know what you're doing, and then all of a sudden they teach you how to do the movement, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can lift this weight. Like, those people that have never picked up a barbell are suddenly doing power cleans and snatches, and they just feel all this power and almost invincibility to a degree. And the same becomes from a mindset of when you see someone overcoming the things you're struggling with, is you start to believe you can too. And so by us sharing people's stories, that story may not resonate with you, but 5 other ones may. And so if we can keep sharing those stories, we can keep touching those people on the outside, looking in, wondering, I can't do that. I can't do that. Wait a minute. They're doing the exact same thing. They're beating what I'm struggling with. If they can do it, I can do this thing.
Mm-hmm. So from the entrepreneurial standpoint, you said early on in your career you weren't getting paid. So for a lot of people, that's not possible. Did you have another full-time job and you were doing this on the side?
Yeah, so I've never had a typical 9-to-5. I really was doing consulting. I worked for a minor league football team in Dallas. I worked for a telecom company, all doing contracts. I would sign contracts with them, figuring out, all right, I need this much money a month to get by. And I would take literally the bare minimum I could to survive on, and then spend every other waking hour on nights, weekends, days doing Compete. And so I did that as long as I possibly could. And I was getting ready to make the jump over to Compete full time, and one of my contracts ended. And so it just ended up being perfect timing of, I'm not going to renew. Let me just make the jump. And so I jumped over, and I've told people, like, I'm not I'm not in the mindset of you got to leave and burn the bridges and go right in, because for most people, it's not a financially smart move, or one that's possible. I mean, you think about it, you got to sell a lot of t-shirts to make money to pay for to even pay your own bills and everything else. And with most physical goods, any money you spend, you have to put right back in to buy more, to sell more. And so, yeah, I'm all for the side hustle. And so I hustled on the side even after I was full-time with Compete. A couple of those old consulting clients would occasionally call and say, hey, we need help for a 60-day period. And so I'd say, yeah, let me jump in and help. I spent savings living off Compete early when I started and before some of the consulting started ramping back up. And so I would jump back in, take a little bit of that to put back into my savings to build it up. And I used to be kind of embarrassed about it, because usually you think of entrepreneurs, you're like, no, you got to go all in and make it work. And I was kind of embarrassed of having to do this stuff on the side, because I was like, man, I'm not legit. But then you start to understand, like, you do whatever it takes to win, and you do whatever it takes to succeed. And if that's what it is, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. I mean, and that story in itself will give people confidence in what it is that they do. So that's great. So who are some of your, like, as an entrepreneur, who are some of your mentors, or who do you look to in this space to give you kind of like guidance and vision on where you're going? Do you have anybody specific like that?
That's probably been one of my biggest downfalls and struggles. And I honestly could tell you, I think our business growth would have accelerated rapidly, much quicker, had I had those mentors. There was no one. I had business mentors. A guy named Merrill Squires worked at Sports Illustrated, and we worked together on some projects. And so talking to him about business and hiring people was great, but I knew no one in this apparel space, and there really wasn't anyone local. I mean, you guys had Sick Fit at the time, and then when it was gone, there was no one in the Texas market. And so me trying to reach out to anyone in there, I had no luck. I learned from printers, and so talking to the printers about what prints work well on shirts and how to be the most cost effective, and so kind of understanding from them. And then otherwise it was reading, and not even podcasts then, but it was reading and videos and anything I could find on, Gary Vaynerchuk and Jason Sadler, and just trying to learn from these people that are out there doing business and online business, and just absorbing everything. Chris Brogan's been probably one of the biggest influences, and I would say mentors now for me. And it started with him just tweeting out one day, like, does anyone need help with anything? And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And so we hopped on a call. He suggested affiliate marketing and me setting up with affiliate marketing and the platform to use. And he was like, yeah, I'd promote it. Like, we'd make money back off of it, and set that up. And that opened a whole new avenue for us of people doing referral sales. And so little things like that has been great. But that's one area when I talk to people now, I'm like, you've got to find someone. And even now, like, I'll have people that'll come and ask me questions and want to be a part. And I'm like, here's how you approach it. Like, it's always from a service mindset. Like Jeff talked to you in the last one, like, always come in and how can I give? But also, like, be right to the point. I think it's Tim Ferriss has a great podcast and post on, like, how to approach people for mentorship. But, like, direct questions, come to them very specific, and if they tell you to go do something, follow back up within 3 weeks that you did it. Because I've had numerous people come to me and ask questions, and if I give them something, hey, you need to read this and this, and they follow back up a month later, and they're like, well, I haven't got to it. I'm like, well, I'm not going to invest any more time either. And so that's one area that it's been like, if you can't find someone directly, just be rabid going online, reading books, finding anything and everything in terms of business, finances, and if there's not a lot in your space, like there's not a lot of people that sell t-shirts that want to tell you how to sell t-shirts because everyone's pretty guarded in how to make money in that space. But find anyone you can, and then just learn everything else about business, because so many of the skills and traits transfer over. And for all intents and purposes, what you learn in one industry may be something that flips a switch in a very different industry.
Mm-hmm. So I know that you're in a few groups, maybe like mastermind groups, or tell me about what you're involved in that capacity.
Yeah, so I'm really just in one. I'd been involved in EO and the Entrepreneur Organizations Accelerator for a little while, but joined a group called The Circle. Wes Chapman runs it. It's pretty much a mastermind, a group of entrepreneurs that support a human project, which is a nonprofit doing some incredible work. Essentially healing dysfunction is what they like to say, and working a lot with kids in schools that are abused and sexually molested, and just helping those children get them out into better situations. And so I joined that group really in the last 8 months. And I connected with people at this conference called Thrive, actually going to here in a couple weeks. Connected with a few of these individuals, saw something on Facebook about them starting this group of people that want to support a human project. I said, I'm in. What do you guys need? Went to the first meeting and was just kind of felt like I was a freshman in the varsity locker room of like, I don't belong here. Like, these people are doing some insane things. And then you get to spend time with them at all these different events, and you see that it's entrepreneurs all over the board, people on my level, people that are just starting, people that are doing what I do in a year and a month. And so that's been a big, almost eye-opener for me. It was a big investment up front initially and was a little scary at first, even though it was completely going to support a group I believed in. But once I got involved, the amount of just perspective shift I've had and like what's possible, what we can actually do, what's capable has really dramatically shifted on how I'm approaching business, how I'm working with our team. And so I can't recommend that enough. There's some that are very inexpensive to get involved in, and some that are like the Genius Network that's, I think, $25,000 a year, and that's a very big investment for people. But I highly suggest people that if you're struggling on who you surround yourself with, struggling for mentors, that's one. And if you really want to get with like-minded people that are trying to build stuff in different spaces, like just joining in and connecting with those people can really shift on how you approach your business.
Mm-hmm. So getting into some specific questions, what has been one of your biggest struggles and how did you overcome it?
Yeah. I think financial management has been a big one, and it's been a cash flow game, because I think apparel is a cash flow game, because every time you sell something, you're putting money right back in to buy more inventory. I mean, even if you have a great sales weekend, like, oh my gosh, we made this money. And then Monday you're like, I'm cutting a check to the production house for all the same amount going back in. And so trying to understand that, we did the CrossFit Games in 2013 and just took one on the chin. I had CrossFit Games and Crush Games back to back that year between end of July and middle of August. And at the time, it was a bigger investment than I probably should have made, but felt that we could make it and we would succeed at both. A little bit foolish on my end. We lost a chunk of money that year on those two events. But what that actually did was it forced me to kind of rally the troops in terms of there was no way out. I had to make the money out. Like, I had to make the money back at that point. And so I went on the road every weekend between like August 23rd and Christmas except one, doing events. Like, I was driving Louisiana and Oklahoma and you name it. Like, if somebody called and said, hey, we have a competition or there's a race, I was like, I'll be there. And so it would load up. And it killed my social life but saved our business that year, because it put cash back into it. And also helped us just get on the map for 2014 and put us in a different position when I would go meet with people and talk to people, because it was me. And they would see me there like, oh, didn't you do this event? And most of them don't know when I'm working events that I actually started the company. And so they'll just talk to us about things, and I can kind of pick their brain about, well, what do you like? Like, what would you want to see different? And so that was a big one. And so now I'm really trying to be a little more conservative on how we approach our finances, especially from a growth standpoint. It's tough to gauge, because one bad quarter, one bad year, you don't want to be to where you're so leveraged that it sinks you. And so now that we've got a profitable business, I'm just trying to read and learn on how to best manage that.
Mm-hmm. So when you made these investments in these events, and then you did, was it the upfront cost of the payment for the event plus the inventory?
Yeah.
So you like stocked up on major inventory.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You stock up heavily, because we came off the South Regional or South Central Regional that year in San Antonio. It had been our best selling event of the year. We're assuming, I'm like, okay, well, it's the CrossFit Games. Like, we're going to do so much better at this. Or we look at, usually, and still now to a degree, I look at what we pay for a booth, what our travel costs are, add up everything that's going to go into it, and then from an inventory, I essentially have to take that number and double it, because you sell your inventory, you got to take out your cost of goods. So if an event costs me $10,000 to be there total, I need to sell 20 plus to break even. And especially early on, you just want to break even on some of these events. And so with that one, like, I think we maybe just got cash back from what was spent. So we just ate it on inventory. We ate it on other things. And so with a lot of those events, you bulk up on the inventory expecting it. Sometimes it's okay because you'll still sell it in the next month or two at other events, online, things like that. But if you make like a specialty shirt for just that event, you're sitting on those. Nobody's going to buy a 2013 whatever shirt now. And so, yeah, it's a huge cost investment, and then afterwards you're trying to liquidate a lot of it, and like most apparel company, you get to end of season and you're marking stuff down because you need to make room for new stuff, and so you never really make all those margins back.
It's good. You a question just came up for me on your do y'all have an office, or where do y'all store all your product?
Small. So the office is a little bit bigger than this room, not by much. The way CrossFit Strong is built in North Dallas is the whole front side is office space. And so there used to be a chiropractic office. We took over their lease. And so it's one room, pretty much floor to ceiling of racks, and then 2 small desks and a computer. And so Michelle on our team comes in every day but Tuesday, every weekday but Tuesday, and fills orders every morning. And then we keep all the inventory there. And so it's kind of a cluster in there because it's like we're tripping over each other in boxes of stuff. And we'll have to get larger space at some point. But we went from a really small office there at Strong because Gail had an open room, and I was like, I got to get this out of my garage, to now that chiropractic office. But we don't have no physical storefront. None of us really meet there to work. We actually will meet at coffee shops around Dallas for meetings and just to brainstorm, because it's better than being kind of covered in clothes.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So moving on to our next question about your top book, top podcast, top movie that you kind of inspire you or impact you.
Yeah, easily the best book that inspired this whole thing is a book called A Million Miles in 1,000 Years by Donald Miller. And it was reading that book that kind of led to the whole journey that ultimately became Compete, because it talks about the story we live is what we tell others we believe and what we hold important, and if what we pursue does the same thing. And so he talked about in his book that if you went to a movie and watched a movie for 2 hours of a guy that wanted a Lexus, and he worked the whole movie to buy this Lexus, and then the credits roll and he bought his Lexus, and that was the end of it. He said, you'd feel cheated. He said, but most of us live our lives that way. We don't have this great story. We're pursuing these vain possessions. And he said, a great story always involves a character that faces adversity, overcomes adversity, and pulls others along with them. And you think about every great action movie and hero and story that's held the test of time, it's always someone facing adversity, overcoming it, and inviting others to be a part of it. And so when I read that, I was like, I'm not living a great story. And so I need to. And what can I do to do that? And so that kind of became that journey. So that's one I recommend to anyone in terms of just going about life. And then the other ones that really impacted kind of my thought process, I read actually last year on my honeymoon. It's called Resilience by Eric Greitens. And it's about applying, like, you don't develop resilience overnight, just like you don't become strong overnight. It's a daily practice and creating those habits and daily mindsets to build that. And the book's him writing a letter to a former Navy SEAL that he used to be in the SEALs with, that was struggling with PTSD, alcoholism, suicide, and it's just a collection of letters to him. And I read it and was just like, finished it, and it's one of those you want to start all over and read all the way through again, because you're like, there's so much wisdom in this that I need to apply. And then podcast, I'm just a junkie. Like, I will listen to anything. Amplify, obviously. Jeff Woods, the mentee, I love. Tim Ferriss. Art of Charm is a fascinating one for me, and Jordan Harbinger and who he interviews, and just what he's able to pull from some of these guests, and talking to people that have kind of been on that show, the amount of background research he does in setting them up so that if somebody launches a new book, you usually see him on 20 podcasts that week, and most all of them are the same. But Jordan does a really fascinating job of putting a very different spin on it, to where I can listen to Gary Vaynerchuk's Ask Gary V book on 2 different podcasts, and I'm like, man, these sound the same. And then he goes on Jordan, and it sounds like a completely different gift. And so that's another one that I get hooked on and kind of pick and choose there.
Mm-hmm. And then any movies, big inspiration for you?
From a work passion standpoint, no. I'm a huge movie junkie, though. Like, I love going. That's kind of like my escape, because it's the one place I'm addicted to my cell phone, and just like for me, customer service is huge on Compete. So like if somebody messages us, like I want to answer immediately. And Christine and the team are like, they can wait 24 hours. Like certain things, it's okay. But the movies is one place, like my cell phone's off and I can't answer it. And I put it on sleep mode or night mode. And so nobody, do not disturb. I'm not feeling it vibrate. So I love going to the movies, because that was kind of my thing as a kid, of like the superheroes and the stories of the people beating the bad guys. And man, I want to be that. You see those movies as a kid and you're like, I want to be Superman, or I want to be, Bruce Willis in Die Hard. Like everybody's got that, because you want to be that character. And so I love going now, because it gives me motivation and ideas for blog posts. Like any movie can do that, because I'll just get ideas. I'm like, how can that correlate to Compete? But also for me, it's just kind of a way to check out for a little bit and relax, because reading and other stuff, I'm either fidgeting with a phone or I'm like writing notes while I'm watching.
So what's the one movie? Well, you got to give me one movie, just your classic.
Classic. Probably my number one all-time movie is The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight. Okay. Good. So if you were able to give individuals sitting across from you three words, or not 3 words, but 3 points of advice that they could implement immediately to impact their life, all ranges, it's not limited to anything, what 3 things would you, lessons would you give them?
First would be wake up 30 minutes earlier every day. And I think 30 minutes is most people are like, I can't do that. I'm already getting up at whatever time. But if you set your alarm 5 minutes earlier today, and you do a week at 5 minutes earlier, and then you do a second week at 10 minutes earlier, and then 15, then you get to that 30-minute point. But I think most of us get out of bed and we just hit the ground running. And if we'll get up an extra 30 minutes, that's an extra, what is that, 3.5 hours a week, that you can read, write, work out, do some, meditate to start your day, something that gives you an advantage over anyone else trying to do what you're trying to do. If you're trying to build a business, it gives you a 30-minute advantage every day on that person, because otherwise we hit the ground and the day kind of controls us versus us controlling the day. Second thing I'd say is read 1 chapter of a book every day. It doesn't matter what the book is. I rotate between biographies and business books and fiction books, and just kind of try to every day 1 chapter. Sometimes I'll try to get more, but for the most part, average 1 chapter, because you can crank through books throughout a year, and just your knowledge base expands so much than if you were scrolling on Facebook at night before bed, or Pinterest, whatever the case may be. And then I think the third is be active. And you don't have to be someone that's super in shape. You don't have to be a fit athlete. You could be someone that's overweight. But if you start investing in being active 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day on a walk, doing something, it gets your blood flow going. I feel like my creativity really picks up when I'm being active every day. Those are kind of the big 3 for me that I also see as habits in a lot of very successful people, that they all kind of share some of those traits, and a few others, but those I see as kind of the big ones. Okay, so if I'm up at 4:30 and 5 o'clock Monday through Friday, you think I should still give it another 30 minutes earlier? Man, you're up early rolling. I think if you're feeling like you're behind and hustling, you might want to give it another 30 minutes. If you're up that early, you may want to try it. The 4th one would have been create a list of 10 every day. Yeah. And James Altucher talks about that, of how he literally creates a brain exercise where every day he has to write a list of 10. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. Some weeks it can be like 10 blog posts or 10 podcast guests I want to have. But he said he gets to it because you'll do 1 through 5 or 6 and you'll just fly. And then 7, 8, 9, 10, it's like lifting that last set. You're like struggling, you're tired. And he said, but when you get to that habit, your brain gets into a habit of thinking bigger and outside the box. And so when you're in a tight position and you actually need ideas, your brain is trained to start thinking of ideas. And so Chris Brogan told me about that. James Altucher had it in his book. It's good. I can't even think of what it is. But that would be, if you're already an early riser like that, I would say swap out the early morning for the list. All right. And then anything that's on your heart, mind, that you're really passionate about right now that you like to share? Yeah, I think my biggest thing that I always want to share and want everyone that ever interacts with me to come across is to understand their life is worth competing for. I think a lot of people struggle with depression. A lot of people are struggling with the negativity in the world and kind of questioning their self-worth as someone that's unqualified for whatever they're dreaming of doing. And I just wish that people, one, understood they were created very uniquely. Like your makeup, your cells, everything is very unique about you. It's not happenstance. And that once you start to understand that, you understand that you are worth it, that your life is worth pursuing, that your behavior can shift, and nothing is really off limits once you kind of throw away those mental barriers. That's the one thing in terms of what other people are doing. I think the two people that I would always encourage everyone to learn more about would be Human Project, Wes Chapman, what those guys are doing with schools, and how if you live in a city that struggles or has a lot of inner city issues, connecting with them and them getting out to your city because they're making some major impacts. And then Phil Randazzo of American Dream U, and Jess Holland, who's a former Austinite, and what they're doing with veterans and entrepreneurs to really impact the servicemen and women. I would just highly recommend you check out AmericanDreamU.org. Find out ways you can either support, serve them, donate, because Phil is a guy that is funding this entire nonprofit out of his own pocket because he believes in it that much, and you just don't see a whole lot of that in the world these days. And so those would be the two people and just purposes that I definitely recommend you check out and passionate about.
Okay, and then how do people find you?
Easy. So Compete Every Day on any social network will be me. I run our Instagram still, and then the team kind of handles a lot of Facebook, Twitter. And then for me, you can actually email me direct, jake@competeeveryday.com. And then I'll shoot you a note back with my personal social media links, and would just love if anyone wants to say hi, have a conversation, talk shop.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Amplify Podcast. You can find more at theamplifypodcast.com. Our social links to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Join us in conversation. Let us know what you're thinking and how we can best service you guys. We will see you again really soon.